Part 1. Philosophy in 60 Seconds. So, cooperative coalescence is a philosophical system, but what actually is philosophy and why is it important? Philosophy is the study of fundamental questions. There are many branches of philosophy, with some of the most important being epistemology, the study of knowledge, logic, the study of reason, and metaphysics, the study of reality. To lay the groundwork for cooperative coalescence, we will start with the metaphysical lens. Metaphysics is the study of fundamental questions of existence, matter, reality, and consciousness. Metaphysics is concerned with answering the question, what are the things that exist? And the follow-up, what are they like? What makes philosophy so important is that it is the foundation for every other branch of human thinking. Philosophy sits underneath politics, religion, and ethics. The true power of a well-designed philosophical system is that it can provide a strong and stable base for human society. In other words, philosophy is how we can scientifically create a consistent and well-reasoned worldview. The most important takeaway is this: since philosophy sits underneath everything else, then the way a society answers the fundamental questions of philosophy dictates everything about how that society is structured. Every aspect of your life is shaped by the socially dominant philosophical framework. You should understand what that framework is and how to judge its quality. The importance of axioms. At the base of any argument is an axiom, an idea that can't be reduced any further and that we have to assume to be true. We can think of axioms as assumptions. Assumptions in general are dangerous, and we should try to have as few of them as possible and keep them as simple and reasonable as we can. An axiom is a non-reducible idea that we take to be a truth. It is a foundation of an argument. Axioms should be simple and reasonable and should be no more than the absolute minimum needed to make our argument. Poorly designed arguments have very unstable axioms that leave a lot of room for error. Here's an example of a poor axiom. Within the dominant philosophical framework, competitive individualism, there is an axiom, an assumption, that human beings have elevated importance over other living and non-living things. But why? There are various different explanations for it, but most of them boil down to because it feels true. We'll dig much deeper into this in a later video. This is a lazy and dangerous way to craft the foundational arguments of human society. If it's true, then let's prove it. And if it's not true, then we ought to figure out what that means for us. We can't be afraid of seeking out potentially scary truths. Cooperative coalescence is an attempt to build a new philosophy on top of axioms that are simple, reasonable, and integrated with the most up-to-date scientific knowledge. Instead of trying to make high-level arguments that must be unquestionable, we will instead craft a solid metaphysical base and build our framework from there. This work can be a little challenging, but if we don't do it this way, we'd effectively just be making things up. Part 2. The Metaphysics of Coalescence. Let us begin by defining our metaphysics. As we said before, metaphysics is concerned with answering the question, what exists? So, what exists? Abstract and concrete objects. Most traditional metaphysics have two base categories of objects that exist, the concrete objects and the abstract objects. The concrete objects are physical objects, while the abstract objects are ideas or concepts. We can agree that a physical desk exists, and that the concept of the number 3 also exists, and that the nature of these two objects is different, right? Abstract and concrete objects. Concrete objects are things made out of matter, while abstract objects are things that are not made out of matter. Ideas, concepts, information, and knowledge all exist in the realm of the abstract. This is a pretty good starting point. However, this leaves the definition of concrete object far too loose. How do we define a thing? Is an atom concrete, a molecule, a smartphone? Leaving the foundation of a philosophy this open to interpretation is not a great start. Over the last century, we have made huge advances in atomic and subatomic scientific knowledge. We have a much more vivid understanding of particle physics now than we used to, and we should use that knowledge to inform our definitions. So while we may use these terms of abstract and concrete in the meantime, let's start from scratch and develop a new foundation. Matter exists. Since we can observe, study, and explain the behavior of matter, we'll take the fact that matter exists as an axiom, an assumption, at the root of our argument. So we ask, knowing that everything is made up of subatomic particles that interact with other subatomic particles, how do we draw the line between one physical object and another? Is there a meaningful scientific way to differentiate between the atomic interactions of the air around a desk and the desk itself? And what separates a droplet of water from the ocean once it falls in? If we answer this question truthfully, without relying on our current assumptions about the world, we'd say, there is no physical basis for separation between concrete objects. To explain, from a physics perspective, an atom in the surface of the desk can and does interact with any of the atoms nearby, not only the ones it is strongly bonded to, and similarly with the water, the molecular bonds in a droplet are no different than those in the ocean. The particles that make up the universe just exist, interacting with any and all other particles that come their way, based on the rules of physics. The particles themselves have no concept of desk or water droplet. However, we can clearly see that desk and water droplet can be identified as separate objects, so we'll need to find something else to explain the separation of matter into different objects within our metaphysics. Matter has properties. In order to find that something else, we must derive it from the facts that we have. We've already established our root axiom: matter exists. From that starting point, what can we discover? Immediately, we can derive one concept from that axiom alone. If matter exists, then it must also have at least one property, the property of existence. Therefore, if matter exists, then matter has properties. In our universe, matter has other properties too, such as an electrical charge, mass, and size. Matter has possibility. We now have two ideas to work with. Can we derive anything else from them? In order to investigate, let's build a thought experiment about the simplest possible universe that uses these two ideas and see if we notice anything. The simplest universe. Picture in your mind a brand new empty universe, completely separate from our own. Inside this universe, there is only a single point. It is not an atom composed of smaller pieces, it is just a singular point. The point is not moving, it is not vibrating, it is not rotating. It has no size, no weight, no mass. It doesn't even have a position, since there is nothing else to measure a position against. The only property of the point is that it exists. An interesting question starts to occur to us. What are the possibilities in this simplest universe? Since the point has no width, length, or height, there are no physical dimensions in this universe. Without dimensions to move on, there is no movement. With only one object, there can be no relationships to other objects. With no possibility for change, there can be no measure of time. The point can't do anything. It can't go anywhere, can't even disappear. The possibility of nothing doesn't even exist in this universe. Math, chemistry, biology, none of these things can exist in this universe because there's no possibility for them. There is just one eternal possibility of the point exists. Through this thought experiment, the simplest universe, we are able to see an important concept. The possibilities for matter emerge from the properties of that matter. Matter has possibility. The existence and properties of matter determine what is possible for that matter. For example, if matter has no orientation, then it is not possible for it to rotate. If matter has no position, it is not possible for it to move. Since all matter that exists has at least one property, the property of existence, then all matter has at least one possibility, that it exists. We can call the total possibilities of matter its possibility space. In the simplest universe, there is only one particle of matter, and it only has one property, that it exists. This results in a very small possibility space with a single possibility, the existence of the point. In our universe, there are many more particles. Popular estimates say at least 3 times 10 to the 80th. And those particles have more properties, giving our universe a possibility space so massive that calculating it would be nearly impossible, never mind actually comprehending the results of the calculation. So getting back to our question, is possibility or something else that allows us to explain the separation of matter into distinct objects? We'll soon see that the answer is yes, but let's continue exploring this idea to see why. Possibility and outcomes. We've now constructed several concepts from our single, reasonable axiom that matter exists. We know that if matter exists, then matter has properties. And if matter has properties, then matter has possibility. So in our quest to answer the question, what exists, we now have 2 answers. Matter exists, and possibility exists. The study of matter is covered exhaustively by the field of physics, but what can we say about possibility? To start, possibility is not probability, nor is it plausibility. In other words, just because something can happen doesn't mean that it will happen. This means that the number of possibilities in the universe is most likely far, far larger than the things that actually occur. To understand this better, let's walk through a thought experiment around something we're all a lot more familiar with: a screen. The possibilities of a screen. Think about the screen you are watching this on right now. Every single pixel on the screen is capable of displaying 16.7 million colors, and the most common display size is 1,920 pixels wide by 1,080 pixels tall, for a total of 2,073,600 pixels. That means that the number of possible images the screen can display is 16,777,216 to the 2,073,600th power, or 1.5 times 10 to the 14.9 millionth power. That is a number that is almost 15 million digits long. If you remember from earlier, we said that the number of particles in the universe is most likely 3 times 10 to the 80th, which is already unfathomably large. The possibility space of this screen is so absolutely unfathomably larger than the number of particles in the universe. That being said, it's important to note how many of the images within the screen's possibility space are nonsense. Imagine if every pixel on the screen displayed a random color. It would just be static noise. And yet that's what the vast majority of the images look like within the possibility space of the screen. But that also means that the trillions of images that anyone has ever seen and ever will see on a screen are among the very, very few that could ever have meaning to a human being. This is what we mean by possibility is not probability. This leads us to think about those very, very few images that end up making it out of the possibility space and onto an actual screen at some point. Every Word document, every website, every social media post, every frame of every video that anyone has ever watched and ever will watch, everything anyone has ever seen on a screen at all first existed conceptually within the screen's possibility space. In other words, from a theoretical perspective, every image that can possibly be displayed on a screen already exists within the possibility space of the screen. And so from this, we get a new concept. Outcomes emerge from possibility. Every single real outcome emerges from its associated possibility space. In the simple example of a screen, every image, outcome, that has ever been displayed on a screen was already present within that screen's possibility space. In the case of physical matter, every single thing, outcome, in the universe emerges from the possibility space created by all of the particles of matter and their property. We now have one more building block. The existence of matter creates possibility, and from possibility emerges real outcomes. Possibilities are conceptual. The final and most important thing we notice is that since possibilities are not physical, they are conceptual. In fact, the possibility space of matter makes room for more than just possible material outcomes, but also for things that are purely conceptual. To illustrate what I mean, in the simplest universe, due to the properties of the point, there was no possibility for position or movement, and so there was no concept of position or movement. There was only a single unchanging thing, so there was no concept of numbers or count, and as a result, no concept of mathematics. Since nothing could change, there was not even a concept of time. In our universe, the particle properties of electric charge and mass create the concept of physics. The multitude of particles create concepts of relationship and numbers, and from those, the concept of mathematics. The properties of matter also create the possibility for particles to come together to create atoms, and for those atoms to bond into molecules. This new layer of possibility creates concepts of chemistry, geology, eventually biology. Given these examples, we should expand our understanding. Inside the possibility space of matter is every concept in the universe. These concepts can represent possible configurations of matter, those outcomes we were talking about, but also purely conceptual ideas. This also finally solves our separation problem. While the particles are just interacting with other particles, we can now say that what separates the desk from the air around it and the drop from the ocean are the concepts of desk, air, droplet, and ocean. Matter and concepts. So where has this exploration landed us? We've proven that if matter exists, then matter has properties. If matter has properties, then matter has possibility. Within the possibility space of matter exists every possible concept in the universe. So now let us answer our original question one more time. What exists? Given everything we've covered, we now claim the only things that exist are the elementary particles that make up atoms, which we'll call matter. However, from the possibilities created by the properties of matter emerges the non-physical concepts. Matter and concepts. Matter and concepts are the two base categories of things that exist. Matter is the particles that make up the physical aspect of the universe, and concepts are the non-tangible possibilities of matter that give structure and meaning to the universe. In the end, this doesn't end up being that different from the concrete abstract object dichotomy of traditional ontology. However, the small differences and the reasoning behind them are important. Instead of calling the entirety of a desk a self-contained concrete object and leaving it at that, we say instead that there exists some matter, and that the concept of a distinct desk object comes out of the possibility space of the matter itself. We no longer have to make incorrect assumptions about how physics works, since particles don't belong to objects, but instead the concept of objects emerge from the particles.